Picture this. A 5-year-old prince walks up to a stern palace guard who has stood motionless for hours,
He's
tugs at
getting
his red
so big,
uniform,
Harry.
and
He
whispers
is. He
something
takes
so
after his mother.
unexpected that it sends
That he
shockwaves through the
does.
entire royal household. What could a
Why are
child
you
possibly
sad?
say
Did
that
someone
would
hurt
make
your
seasoned
feelings?
guards break their legendary discipline, cause emergency meetings among palace staff, and ultimately change a centuries-old royal tradition forever?
This isn't just another cute royal moment caught on camera. This is the story of how Prince Louis, the youngest son of the Prince and Princess of Wales, accidentally exposed a hidden truth that the palace had been keeping secret for decades. His innocent observation would lead to revelations that no one saw coming, challenging everything people thought they knew about life behind the palace walls. Get ready for a tale that proves sometimes the most profound truths come from the mouths of babes, and that even in the most formal institutions in the world, a child's honesty can turn everything upside down. The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine courtyard of Windsor Castle as 5-year-old Prince Louis bounced excitedly beside his mother Catherine, Princess of Wales. It was a typical Tuesday in late spring, and the young prince had accompanied his mother to what should have been a routine visit to inspect the castle's ceremonial preparations for an upcoming state dinner. Little did anyone know that this ordinary day would become anything but typical. Prince Louis had always been known within royal circles as the family's spirited child. Unlike his older siblings, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, who had learned early to navigate royal protocol with careful precision, Louis possessed an irrepressible curiosity that often led him into uncharted territory. His bright blue eyes seemed to take in everything around him with the intensity of someone discovering the world for the first time, which in many ways he was. As they walked through the castle's grand corridors, Louis's small hand clasped tightly in his mother's. The princess explained the various paintings and historical artifacts that lined the walls. She had made it a priority to ensure her children understood their heritage, but she also wanted them to see beyond the formality and grandeur, to understand the human stories behind their family's legacy. The castle staff had grown accustomed to these informal educational tours that Catherine often conducted with her children. They appreciated her hands-on approach to parenting, which stood in refreshing contrast to the more distant child-rearing practices of previous royal generations. Housekeepers would smile warmly as the family passed, and even the most senior staff members had learned to expect the unexpected when Prince Louis was part of the group. On this particular morning, the castle was preparing for a visit from the President of France, which meant that every detail had to be perfect. The ceremonial guards had been positioned at their posts since dawn, standing with the rigid discipline that had made the British Royal Guards famous worldwide. Their red tunics were immaculate, their tall black bearskin hats perfectly positioned, and their expressions remained completely neutral despite the hours they had already spent motionless at their stations. Catherine had planned their route carefully, wanting to show Louis how the castle transformed during these important state occasions. She explained how each guard had trained for months to maintain their composure regardless of weather, distractions, or physical discomfort. It was, she told him, one of the most honored traditions of royal service, dating back hundreds of years. As they approached the main ceremonial hall, Louis's attention was immediately captured by one particular guard who stood at attention near the entrance. The guard was younger than most of the others, perhaps in his early 20s, with fair hair visible beneath his ceremonial hat. What caught Louis's eye wasn't the impressive uniform or the perfect posture, but something else entirely that his young mind immediately noticed but couldn't quite articulate. The guard's name was James Morrison, and he had been serving in the royal household for just over 2 years. He had worked incredibly hard to earn his position, coming from a modest background in northern England, where his father worked in a factory and his mother cleaned offices at night to make ends meet. For James, wearing the royal uniform represented not just personal achievement, but the fulfillment of a dream that had seemed impossible during his childhood. James had been standing at his post for nearly 3 hours when the royal family approached. Like all royal guards, he had been trained to ignore distractions completely, to remain focused straight ahead, regardless of what happened around him. He had successfully maintained his composure through thunderstorms, tourist crowds, and even the occasional attempt by visitors to make him react. But nothing in his training had prepared him for what was about to happen. Prince Louis had been walking quietly beside his mother, occasionally asking questions about the various artifacts and ceremonial elements they encountered. Catherine patiently answered each inquiry, appreciating her son's genuine interest in learning about his family's traditions. But as they drew closer to James's position, Louis began to study the young guard with the intense focus that children often bring to things that puzzle them. The princess noticed her son's fascination and gently attempted to guide him past the guard without incident. She had learned from experience that Louis's curiosity, while generally delightful, could sometimes lead to unexpected situations. She placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, intending to direct his attention to a magnificent painting that hung nearby. But Louis had noticed something that no adult had seen, or if they had seen it, they had chosen to ignore it completely. His young eyes, unencumbered by the social conventions that adults unconsciously followed, had picked up on details that everyone else had overlooked. He stopped walking and turned to look directly at James, his small face scrunched up in concentration as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The other staff members who were accompanying the princess began to feel slightly uncomfortable. They knew that engaging with the guards during their ceremonial duties was strictly forbidden, and they worried about what the unpredictable young prince might do. Catherine sensed the tension and gently tried to encourage Louis to continue walking, but he remained rooted in place, staring at the motionless guard. What Louis had noticed was something that would have been invisible to most adults, but to a child's unfiltered perception it was as obvious as the sun in the sky. James Morrison, despite his perfect uniform and flawless posture, was crying. Not the dramatic, obvious crying that adults might notice, but the quiet, steady tears of someone trying desperately to maintain composure while dealing with overwhelming emotion. The tears were so subtle that they were barely visible, just a slight wetness around the edges of James's eyes that caught the light in a way that drew Louis's attention. To everyone else, James appeared to be the picture of professional discipline. His breathing was controlled, his posture perfect, and his expression remained completely neutral. But Louis saw past all of that to the human being underneath the uniform. For several long moments, Louis simply stood there, studying James's face, with the intense concentration that children bring to mysteries they're trying to solve. Catherine grew increasingly concerned about the situation. Knowing that drawing attention to a guard during ceremonial duties could potentially cause problems for everyone involved, she tried once more to guide her son away, but Louis remained focused on James. The tension in the corridor was becoming palpable. The other staff members exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to handle the situation without creating an even bigger disruption. Catherine found herself in the difficult position of wanting to respect her son's natural curiosity while also maintaining the dignity and protocol that were expected in these formal settings. Finally, Louis made a decision that would change everything. Instead of simply walking away or asking his mother a question, he took a small step forward, moving closer to James's position. The movement was so slight that it might have gone unnoticed under normal circumstances, but given the formal setting and the strict protocols surrounding the ceremonial guards, it felt significant to everyone watching. Catherine's heart began to race as she realized what was happening. She knew she needed to intervene quickly, but she also didn't want to create a scene that might embarrass the guard or disrupt the ceremonial preparations. She took a gentle step forward, intending to guide Louis away from the situation. But her son had already begun to speak. What came out of Louis's mouth next would send ripples through the entire royal household and challenge assumptions that had remained unquestioned for generations. His words were simple, innocent, and delivered with the matter-of-fact tone that children use when stating obvious truths that adults somehow miss. The young prince looked directly at James, tilted his head slightly to one side, and said in a voice that was clearly audible to everyone in the corridor, "Why are you sad? Did someone hurt your feelings?" The effect of these words was immediate and profound. James Morrison, who had maintained perfect composure through countless hours of ceremonial duty, felt his carefully controlled facade begin to crack. The unexpected kindness and genuine concern in the child's voice touched something deep inside him that he had been trying desperately to suppress. For James, this moment represented the collision of two worlds that he had worked hard to keep separate. His professional life as a royal guard required absolute emotional control and the ability to remain detached from personal concerns while on duty. But his personal life had recently been turned upside down by news that had left him struggling to cope with emotions he didn't know how to handle. The other staff members who witnessed this exchange felt the air change in the corridor. They had all been trained to handle various protocol situations, but this was something entirely different. A 5-year-old prince had just acknowledged the humanity of a ceremonial guard in a way that broke through centuries of formal tradition. Catherine felt her throat tighten as she watched the scene unfold. She could see the impact that her son's words were having on the young guard, and she began to understand that something much deeper was happening here than a simple breach of protocol. Her maternal instincts told her that Louis had recognized genuine distress, and her heart went out to both her son and the guard, who was clearly struggling with something significant. The moment stretched on, filled with tension and unexpected emotion. James continued to stare straight ahead, but everyone could see that he was fighting an internal battle between his professional training and his human response to the child's compassion. His eyes remained fixed on the wall opposite him, but the tears that Louis had noticed were becoming more difficult to hide. Louis, meanwhile, continued to study James's face with the unwavering attention that children bring to situations they don't fully understand but recognize as important. He seemed completely unaware of the protocol implications of his question, focused entirely on the human connection he felt with someone who appeared to be in pain. This was the moment that would later be discussed in emergency meetings among senior palace staff, analyzed by protocol experts, and ultimately lead to changes that no one could have predicted. But in that immediate instant, it was simply a child reaching out to another human being who seemed to need kindness. What happened next would demonstrate just how powerful genuine compassion could be, even in the most formal and tradition-bound institutions in the world. The ripple effects of Louis's simple question would spread far beyond that corridor, touching lives and changing perspectives in ways that would take months to fully understand. James Morrison had been holding back tears for 3 days, ever since receiving the phone call that shattered his world. His younger sister Emma, who was just 17 and had been battling leukemia for 2 years, had taken a sudden turn for the worse. The doctors had called his parents to the hospital, explaining that the experimental treatment they had pinned their hopes on wasn't working as expected. Time was running out, and Emma had been asking for her big brother.
The call had come on Sunday evening while James was in his quarters polishing his ceremonial boots and preparing for the week ahead.
His mother's voice had been barely audible through her tears as she tried to explain what the doctors had told them. Emma, who had been responding well to treatment just weeks earlier, had developed complications that were proving difficult to manage.
The medical team was doing everything they could, but they wanted the family to be prepared for all possibilities. James had immediately requested emergency leave to travel home to Yorkshire, but his commanding officer had explained that with the French president's visit scheduled for later in the week, no ceremonial guards could be spared.
The state dinner was considered a matter of national importance, and every position had to be filled by the most experienced guards available. James's request would be considered after the official ceremonies were completed. Understanding the demands of royal service, James had accepted this decision without complaint. He knew when he joined the royal household that personal sacrifices would be required, and he had always prided himself on his professionalism. But knowing that his little sister was fighting for her life while he stood motionless in ceremonial dress felt like a betrayal of everything that truly mattered to him. Emma had always been James's closest family member. When their father worked double shifts at the factory and their mother took cleaning jobs to pay the medical bills, James had often been responsible for looking after his sister. He had helped her with homework, walked her to school, and been her biggest supporter during her illness. She called him her hero, which always made him both proud and humble. The irony wasn't lost on him that while he wore a uniform that symbolized honor and service, he couldn't be there for the person who needed him most. Emma had specifically asked their mother when James would come home, and hearing that he couldn't get leave until after the state dinner had sent her into a crying spell that the nurses struggled to calm. So when Prince Louis looked directly at him and asked why he was sad, James felt something inside him break open. The child's genuine concern and innocent directness cut through all the formal barriers he had erected around his emotions. For the first time since receiving that devastating phone call, someone had acknowledged his pain instead of expecting him to pretend it didn't exist. Catherine watched as James's composure began to visibly crack. She could see the internal struggle playing out across his features, and her heart went out to him. As a mother, she instinctively recognized the look of someone dealing with a family crisis, and she understood immediately that her son had stumbled upon something much more significant than a simple moment of sadness. The other staff members in the corridor were uncertain how to respond. Protocol dictated that they should quickly move the royal family past the guard and pretend the interaction hadn't happened. But Catherine made a decision that would surprise everyone present. Instead of hurrying Louis away from the situation, she gently approached the guard herself. "I'm sorry," she said quietly to James, "but my son seems to sense that you're troubled about something. Are you all right?" This direct acknowledgement from the Princess of Wales was completely unprecedented. Royal family members did not typically engage in personal conversations with ceremonial guards during official duties, but Catherine had spent years working with various charities focused on mental health and family support, and she had learned to recognize genuine distress when she saw it. James fought to maintain his professional composure, but the combination of emotional exhaustion and unexpected kindness proved overwhelming. A single tear rolled down his cheek and his voice was barely audible when he whispered, "My sister is very ill, Your Royal Highness. She's in hospital, and I can't be with her." The words hung in the air, creating a moment of profound human connection that transcended all the formal protocols and ceremonial requirements that usually governed these interactions. Louis, who had been watching intently, immediately understood that his instincts had been correct.
The guard was indeed sad, and his sadness was connected to someone he loved being hurt. Without hesitation, Louis stepped closer to James and said, "Is your sister little like me? I have a sister too, and when she's sick it makes me scared." This simple statement of empathy from a 5-year-old prince created an emotional moment that none of the adults present would ever forget. James looked down at Louis and saw genuine caring in the child's eyes, the same unconditional love that his sister Emma always showed him.
The similarity was so striking that it took his breath away. Catherine made another unprecedented decision.
He asked her security detail to give them a few moments of privacy, then gently guided James to a small alcove just off the main corridor. Louis followed, still concerned about the guard who had captured his attention and sympathy.
"Tell me about your sister," Catherine said gently, her voice carrying the warmth that had made her beloved by people around the world. "What's her name?" "Emma," James replied, his voice still barely above a whisper.
She's 17 and she's been fighting leukemia for 2 years. The doctors called on Sunday to say the treatment isn't working as well as they hoped. She keeps asking when I'm coming home, and I can't leave until after the state dinner."
Catherine felt her heart clench as she listened to James's story. As a mother, she couldn't imagine being kept away from her children during a medical crisis. But she also understood the complex demands of royal service and the difficulties that staff members often faced in balancing personal needs with professional obligations. Louis, meanwhile, had been listening to every word with the intense focus that children bring to adult conversations they sense are important.
When James finished speaking, the young prince reached into his pocket and pulled out a small toy car, one of his favorites, that he often carried with him during castle visits. "This is for your sister," Louis said, holding out the toy car to James.
It's lucky and it makes me feel better when I'm scared. Maybe it will help her not be scared too.
The gesture was so unexpected and heartfelt that it left James speechless. Here was a 5-year-old prince offering his treasured toy to a guard's sister he had never met, simply because he understood that she needed comfort. The kindness was overwhelming in its purity and simplicity. Catherine watched this exchange with tears in her own eyes.
She had always been proud of her children's compassionate instincts, but seeing Louis's immediate response to another person's pain reinforced everything she hoped to teach them about empathy and service to others.
"Would you like to call your parents?" Catherine asked James.
"I'm sure we can arrange for you to speak with your sister as well." This offer violated several protocols regarding guards' personal time during ceremonial duties, but Catherine had made a decision that the human element of this situation was more important than strict adherence to rules. She could see that James was barely holding himself together, and she knew that a brief conversation with his family might help him maintain his composure for the remainder of his duties.
James was so overcome by this unexpected kindness that he could barely speak. In his 2 years of royal service, he had never experienced anything like this level of personal attention and care from members of the royal family.
He had always been taught to maintain strict professional boundaries, but now those boundaries were being gently dissolved by genuine human compassion. "Sitting on the stage today, don't know how to thank you," he managed to say.
"This means more than you could possibly know." Catherine smiled warmly.
We're all human beings first, and family is the most important thing in the world. Let's see what we can do to help. As word of this interaction began to spread quietly through the castle staff, people started to pay attention to the situation in ways they never had before. The head of security was initially concerned about the protocol breach, but when he learned the details of James's situation, his perspective began to shift. The castle's head housekeeper, Mrs. Matthews, had known James since he first arrived for training. She had always been impressed by his dedication and professionalism, but she had never known about his family struggles. When she heard about his sister's illness and his inability to be with her, she immediately began thinking about ways the royal household might be able to help.
Meanwhile, Louis remained focused on the immediate problem as only a child could. "Can we visit her?" he asked his mother.
"Maybe if she meets a real prince, it will make her feel better." This suggestion, while impractical for numerous security and protocol reasons, demonstrated the kind of thinking that often cuts straight to the heart of complex adult situations.
Louis couldn't understand why bureaucratic requirements would prevent someone from helping a sick girl, and his innocent question forced the adults around him to reconsider their assumptions about what was truly important. Catherine knew that arranging a royal visit to James's sister would be incredibly complicated, but she was determined to find some way to help the situation. She had learned throughout her years of royal service that sometimes the most meaningful gestures were the ones that broke conventional molds and reached people in unexpected ways. The conversation continued in that small alcove for nearly 15 minutes,
during which time James was able to speak openly about his fears for his sister and his frustration at being unable to be with her during this critical time.
Catherine listened with the same attention she would give to any parent facing a family crisis, and Louis continued to offer the kind of simple, direct comfort that children instinctively provide. When they finally emerged from their private conversation, something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere of the castle.
Word was already spreading among the staff that Princess Catherine and Prince Louis had taken time to comfort a guard who was dealing with a family emergency. This kind of personal attention was unprecedented, and it was causing people throughout the royal household to reconsider their understanding of how the royal family related to their staff.
What none of them realized was that this was only the beginning of a chain of events that would ultimately change not just James's situation, but the entire culture of support and care within the royal household. Prince Louis's simple question had opened a door that would lead to discoveries and changes that no one could have anticipated.
Within an hour of the encounter with James Morrison, Catherine had initiated a series of phone calls that would surprise everyone involved.
Her first call was to Prince William, who was attending meetings in London but immediately grasped the significance of what his wife was describing. Her second call was to the Queen's private secretary, explaining the situation and requesting guidance on how to properly handle a staff member's family emergency without disrupting state protocols. The response from senior palace officials was swift and decisive. Rather than viewing the situation as a protocol breach that needed to be contained, they recognized it as an opportunity to demonstrate the values that the modern royal family wanted to embody.
Queen Camilla herself, when briefed on the situation, immediately authorized whatever support might be needed for James and his family. Meanwhile, Louis had become completely absorbed in the mission of helping James's sister.
He spent the remainder of the morning asking detailed questions about hospitals, doctors, and how to make sick people feel better. His innocent inquiries forced the adults around him to explain complex medical and emotional concepts in simple terms, which often led to insights that surprised everyone involved.
"Why can't the doctors just fix her?" Louis asked Catherine as they continued their tour of the castle. "When I have a cut, you put a bandage on it and it gets better." Catherine paused, considering how to explain the complexities of serious illness to a 5-year-old. "Some sicknesses are much more complicated than cuts," she said gently. "Emma's sickness is fighting against the medicine, so the doctors have to try different ways to help her get better. But sometimes the most important medicine is knowing that people love you and are thinking about you." This explanation seemed to satisfy Louis, who immediately began planning ways to show Emma that people cared about her. He suggested making her a drawing, sending her some of his favorite books, and even asked if they could arrange for her to meet Princess Charlotte since they were both girls and might understand each other better. These suggestions, while logistically challenging, reflected the kind of direct action-oriented thinking that often cut through adult complications to focus on what really mattered.
Louis couldn't understand why distance, protocol, or scheduling would prevent people from helping someone who was sick and scared. By early afternoon, the story had reached Prince William, who made an immediate decision to travel to Windsor to better understand the situation.
When he arrived and heard the full account from Catherine and several staff members who had witnessed the morning's events, he was struck by both his son's intuitive compassion and the broader implications of what had occurred. "This isn't just about one family," William explained to his senior staff during an impromptu meeting. "This is about whether we truly support the people who dedicate their lives to serving our family and our country. If we can't help our own staff during their most difficult moments, what does that say about our values?" The prince's words sparked a deeper conversation about the support systems available to royal household staff. While the palace had always provided excellent professional benefits and training, the personal support for family emergencies had often been limited by rigid scheduling requirements and protocol considerations. James Morrison, meanwhile, was struggling to process the overwhelming kindness he had received. During his scheduled break, he was approached by Mrs. Matthews, the head housekeeper, who informed him that arrangements were being made for him to speak with his family via video call from the castle's private communications center.
"But the French president's arrival ceremony is tomorrow," James protested. "I need to be at my post."
Mrs. Connecticut.
Matthews smiled warmly. "Young man, you've been given a direct order from the Princess of Wales to take care of your family first. I don't think you want to disobey a direct royal command, do you?" The video call that followed was emotional and transformative. Emma Morrison, despite being weakened by her treatment, lit up when she saw her brother's face on the screen. But her excitement reached new heights when Prince Louis unexpectedly appeared in the video call, holding the toy car he had intended for her. "Hi, Emma," Louis said with the straightforward friendliness that children use when meeting someone new. "I heard you're sick and I wanted to give you something to help you feel braver." Emma was speechless.
In her 17 years, she had never imagined having a conversation with a member of the royal family, let alone receiving a personal gift from a prince.
The surreal nature of the situation helped distract her from her pain and fear, replacing those feelings with wonder and excitement. "Is that really a prince?" she whispered to James, who was equally amazed by the turn of events.
"Yes," James replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And he wanted to meet you because he thinks you're very brave." Louis, unaware of the historical significance of what he was doing, proceeded to have a perfectly normal conversation with Emma about her favorite colors, whether she liked cars or dolls better, and what kind of movies she enjoyed watching.
His natural, unaffected manner helped Emma relax in a way that months of medical consultations hadn't achieved. Catherine, who had been coordinating this call from behind the scenes, watched the interaction with deep satisfaction.
She had learned throughout her royal service that sometimes the most meaningful impacts came from the simplest gestures, and seeing her son's natural compassion in action reinforced her belief in the importance of authentic human connection. The conversation lasted for nearly 30 minutes, during which time Emma's spirits visibly improved.
She laughed at Louis's silly questions, showed him the artwork she'd been creating during her hospital stay, and even sang him a song that she had learned from one of the nurses. The transformation in her demeanor was remarkable, and it was captured on the hospital's monitoring equipment as her stress levels decreased and her vital signs stabilized. Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's primary oncologist, observed this interaction with professional fascination. In her 15 years of treating pediatric cancer patients, she had seen how emotional support could impact treatment outcomes, but this was an extraordinary example of how human connection could provide healing benefits that medicine alone couldn't achieve. "The psychological boost she's receiving from this attention is measurable," Doctor admitted itself as proud as patient. Chen explained to Emma's parents. "Her body is responding to the positive emotions in ways that will actually support her medical treatment. Sometimes the best medicine isn't something we can prescribe." Word of Louis's video call with Emma began to spread beyond the immediate royal household.
Several staff members who had witnessed the prince's compassionate response began sharing their own stories of personal challenges they had faced while trying to maintain their professional obligations. What emerged was a picture of dedicated employees who had often struggled silently with family crises, health issues, and personal emergencies while maintaining their commitment to royal service.
Catherine and William began to understand that James's situation wasn't unique.
Many of their staff members had faced similar conflicts between personal needs and professional duties, but the rigid nature of royal protocols had often prevented them from seeking help or support. The system that was designed to ensure smooth operations was inadvertently creating unnecessary stress and isolation for the very people who made that smooth operation possible. This realization led to an emergency review of the royal household's employee support policies. Within hours, teams were examining everything from emergency leave procedures to mental health resources, looking for ways to better support staff members during personal crises.
Prince Louis, blissfully unaware of the administrative revolution he had inadvertently triggered, remained focused on his new friend Emma. He asked Catherine if they could send Emma more toys, whether they could arrange for her to watch a movie with Princess Charlotte via video call, and if there was a way for her to visit the castle once she felt better.
These questions led to an innovative solution that surprised everyone involved. The royal family's education coordinator suggested creating a virtual tour of the castle specifically for Emma, allowing her to see all the places that Louis had described during their conversation. This would give her something exciting to focus on during her treatment while providing a unique form of entertainment that might help with her recovery. The virtual tour concept quickly expanded into something much more ambitious.
Technical staff began planning an interactive experience that would allow Emma to visit various parts of the castle, meet different staff members virtually, and even participate in some of the educational activities that the royal children enjoyed during their visits. James Morrison found himself at the center of preparations that seemed almost impossible to believe.
The royal household staff was coordinating a complex technological project specifically designed to help his sister feel better during her cancer treatment. The contrast between his morning despair and afternoon hope was so dramatic that he struggled to process it all. But the most significant change was happening within the royal household itself. Staff members throughout the castle began talking more openly about their own challenges and supporting each other in ways that had previously been discouraged by the emphasis on professional distance.
Louis's simple question had created a ripple effect that was transforming the entire culture of the workplace. The French president's visit, which had seemed so important and stressful just hours earlier, began to feel less overwhelming as the staff realized they were part of an institution that truly cared about them as individuals.
The knowledge that their personal welfare mattered to the royal family they served created a sense of loyalty and dedication that no amount of professional training could have achieved. As evening approached, final preparations were being made for the technological setup that would allow Emma to have her virtual castle tour the following day.
But more importantly, a new understanding was emerging about the relationship between the royal family and the people who served them. Prince Louis's innocent observation had revealed truths about compassion, service, and human dignity that would influence royal household policies for years to come.
What no one yet realized was that Emma Morrison's story was about to take another unexpected turn, one that would capture international attention and forever change how the world viewed the modern British royal family's approach to service and compassion. The next morning brought unexpected news that would change everything.
Dr. Sarah Chen called the Morrison family at 6 a.m. with an update that left everyone speechless. Emma's latest blood tests showed improvements that the medical team hadn't seen in months. Her white blood cell count had stabilized, her energy levels were measurably higher, and most significantly, she had slept through the night for the first time since her treatment complications had begun. We can't scientifically prove that yesterday's emotional boost caused these improvements, Dr. Chen explained to Emma's parents, but the timing is remarkable. Sometimes psychological healing creates the conditions for physical healing to occur. Emma's body is responding to hope in ways that we don't fully understand but can't ignore. When this news reached James at Windsor Castle, he was preparing for the French president's arrival ceremony. The contrast between his despair of the previous morning and his current overwhelming gratitude was so profound that several fellow guards noticed the transformation in his demeanor. He stood taller, his movements were more confident, and there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there for days. Prince Louis, who had awakened early and immediately asked about Emma's condition, was thrilled to hear the good news. His first response was typically direct and action-oriented. "Can we call her again? I want to show her my new book about castles." This request led to another video call, during which Emma appeared noticeably stronger and more alert than she had been the day before. The improvement was visible to everyone participating in the call, and it reinforced Dr. Chen's observations about the connection between emotional support and physical healing. During their conversation, Emma mentioned that she had been telling all the nurses and other patients about her royal friend, and that several other children in the cancer ward had become excited about the possibility of meeting Prince Louis themselves. This innocent comment sparked an idea that would soon become much bigger than anyone initially imagined.
Catherine, who was listening to the conversation, began to understand that Emma's situation represented just one example of how the royal family might be able to provide meaningful support to people facing serious challenges. If a simple video call could have such a positive impact on one child's treatment, what might be possible with a more systematic approach to this kind of outreach?
The French president's visit proceeded flawlessly, with James Morrison performing his ceremonial duties with a level of focus and pride that impressed his commanding officers. But the real story was happening behind the scenes, where palace staff had begun implementing immediate changes to their employee support systems. Mrs. Matthews had compiled a list of other staff members who were dealing with family challenges that had previously been handled privately and sometimes with significant personal sacrifice. The list included a cook whose elderly mother had dementia, a groundskeeper whose son had been deployed to Afghanistan, and a housemaid whose daughter was struggling with severe learning disabilities. Each of these situations represented opportunities for the royal household to demonstrate the same kind of personal care that had been shown to James Morrison. But more importantly, they revealed how many dedicated employees had been carrying heavy emotional burdens while maintaining their professional obligations. Prince William, after reviewing these cases, made a decision that would establish a new precedent for royal household management. He announced the creation of a family support coordinator position specifically designed to help staff members navigate personal crises while maintaining their professional responsibilities. "The people who serve our family often sacrifice their own family time to ensure our success," William explained to his senior staff. "We have a responsibility to support them when they need it most, not just as employees but as the valuable human beings they are." This announcement was met with surprise and gratitude throughout the castle. Many staff members had worked in royal service for decades without ever experiencing this level of personal attention and care. The knowledge that their well-being mattered to the royal family created a profound shift in workplace morale and loyalty. Meanwhile, Emma's virtual castle tour had grown into an elaborate production involving multiple departments and cutting-edge technology. The education team had created interactive experiences. The kitchen staff had prepared traditional royal recipes that Emma could make at home, and even the royal florists had designed arrangements specifically for her to enjoy during her treatment. But the most significant development came when Princess Charlotte asked if she could participate in Emma's virtual tour. The 9-year-old princess had been deeply moved by her brother's story about the sick girl who needed cheering up,
and she wanted to contribute to the effort to help Emma feel better.
"Can I show her my room and my favorite places in the castle?" Charlotte asked her mother. "Maybe we could read a story together, or play a game over video call." This request led to a collaboration between the two sisters that exceeded everyone's expectations.
Charlotte's natural leadership abilities and Lewis's infectious enthusiasm created an entertaining and educational experience that kept Emma engaged for hours. The three children developed an instant friendship that transcended the unusual circumstances of their meeting. The success of Emma's virtual tour quickly attracted attention from hospital staff who worked with other pediatric patients. Dr. Chen approached the royal household with a proposal to expand the program to include other children who were dealing with serious illnesses and could benefit from the same kind of positive distraction and emotional support. This proposal aligned perfectly with Catherine's long-standing interest in children's healthcare and mental health support. She had seen firsthand how her own children's natural compassion could provide comfort to others, and she began to envision ways to systematically harness that compassion for broader charitable purposes. The expansion of what became known as the Royal Friends program happened with remarkable speed. Within a week, technology specialists had developed a system that could connect hospitalized children across the UK with virtual experiences at various royal properties. The program included interactive tours, educational activities, and personal conversations with members of the royal family and their staff. James Morrison found himself at the center of these developments in ways he had never anticipated.
His sister's recovery had accelerated beyond all medical expectations, and her positive attitude had become an inspiration to other patients in her ward. But more significantly, his own experience had triggered changes that would benefit countless other royal household employees and the broader community. The media attention that began to surround these developments was initially modest but grew steadily as word spread about the royal family's innovative approach to service and compassion.
Child health advocates praised the program's recognition of the connection between emotional well-being and medical recovery, while workplace experts highlighted the progressive employee support policies that had emerged from the situation. Emma Morrison, who had been near despair just days earlier, found herself becoming an unexpected ambassador for hope and resilience.
Her story resonated with families across the UK who were dealing with similar challenges, and her friendship with Prince Louis became a symbol of how genuine human connection could transcend any social or economic barriers. The transformation in Emma's condition continued to amaze her medical team. Her response to treatment improved dramatically, her energy levels soared, and most importantly, her outlook on life shifted, from fear and despair to optimism and excitement about the future. The psychological boost she had received was translating into measurable medical improvements that supported her body's fight against cancer. Dr. Chen began documenting Emma's case as an example of how innovative emotional support could complement traditional medical treatment. Her findings would later contribute to research about the role of positive psychology in pediatric cancer care, influencing treatment approaches at hospitals throughout Europe. But perhaps the most significant impact was on Prince Louis himself. His simple act of noticing another person's distress and responding with genuine caring had created a chain of positive changes that extended far beyond anything he could understand. The experience reinforced his natural empathy and taught him that even small gestures of kindness could have enormous consequences.
Catherine and William watched their son's development with pride and wonder. They had always hoped to raise children who would use their privileged position to help others, but seeing Louis's instinctive compassion in action exceeded their highest expectations. He had demonstrated that authentic service to others could emerge naturally from a caring heart regardless of age or formal training. As the week progressed, it became clear that the events triggered by Louis's innocent question had created lasting changes that would influence the royal household for generations. New policies, programs, and attitudes had emerged that reflected a deeper understanding of the relationship between privilege and responsibility, between service and compassion. The French president's visit, which had seemed so important just days earlier, became a footnote to a much more significant story about human dignity, institutional change, and the power of a child's uncomplicated love to transform complex adult systems. What had started as a simple question about sadness had evolved into a comprehensive reimagining of how the modern royal family could serve not just the nation, but the individuals who made their service possible. The ripple effects of these changes were just beginning to be felt, and they would continue to expand in ways that would surprise and inspire people around the world. 6 months later, the annual Royal Christmas broadcast featured an unprecedented segment that surprised viewers around the world. The camera showed Prince Louis sitting beside a beautifully decorated Christmas tree, speaking directly to children who were spending the holidays in hospitals across the UK. "Hi everyone," Louis said with the natural confidence of a child who had grown comfortable with his ability to bring joy to others.
I know being in hospital during Christmas isn't fun, but I want you to know that lots of people are thinking about you and hoping you feel better soon.
Behind this touching moment lay a story that had transformed not just the royal family's approach to public service, but had created lasting changes in how institutions across the UK supported both their employees and the broader community. Emma Morrison's recovery had been remarkable, exceeding all medical expectations, and her friendship with the royal children had become a model for therapeutic programs at children's hospitals throughout Europe.
The Royal Friends program had expanded beyond anyone's initial vision. What had started as a simple virtual tour for one sick child had evolved into a comprehensive support network that connected the royal family with vulnerable children across the Commonwealth.
The program now included regular video calls, educational activities, art projects, and even virtual attendance at royal events for children who couldn't leave their hospital beds. Dr. Sarah Chen had become a leading advocate for incorporating emotional support into medical treatment protocols. Her research on Emma's case had been published in several medical journals, contributing to a growing body of evidence about the connection between psychological well-being and physical healing. Hospitals in 12 countries had implemented similar programs, creating connections between patients and various public figures who could provide positive distraction and emotional support. James Morrison had been promoted within the royal household, not because of the publicity surrounding his sister's story, but because his experience had demonstrated the kind of dedication and character that the royal family valued most highly.
He had been selected to help train new guards, with a special focus on maintaining professionalism while also recognizing the human needs of both staff members and the people they served. But the most significant changes had occurred within the royal household's employee support systems.
The Family Support Coordinator position had evolved into a comprehensive department that provided counseling, emergency assistance, and advocacy for staff members facing personal challenges. The department had helped dozens of employees navigate family crises, health issues, and financial difficulties without having to choose between their personal needs and professional obligations.
Mrs. Matthews, the head housekeeper, had become an unexpected champion of these new support systems.
She had always cared about the staff members under her supervision, but the formal policies now gave her tools and resources to provide meaningful help during difficult times. The transformation in workplace morale had been remarkable, with staff retention reaching the highest levels in palace history.
Emma Morrison had not only recovered from her cancer but had become a passionate advocate for other children facing serious illnesses. Her experience with the royal family had inspired her to study psychology and child development, with the goal of creating programs that could systematically provide the kind of emotional support that had been so crucial to her own healing. When Prince Louis asked why I was sad, Emma explained to audiences at charity events, "It felt like someone finally saw me as a real person instead of just a sick kid. That recognition gave me strength I didn't know I had, and it reminded me that I was more than my illness." Her story had resonated far beyond the UK, inspiring similar programs in countries around the world. Child welfare organizations had adopted elements of the Royal Friends model, creating connections between young people facing challenges and public figures who could provide encouragement and support.
Prince Charlotte had emerged as an enthusiastic participant in these programs, demonstrating remarkable maturity and empathy in her interactions with hospitalized children.
Her natural teaching abilities and creative thinking had made her especially effective at developing activities that could engage children during long treatment periods. The princess had also influenced her school's approach to community service, inspiring classmates to create their own programs for supporting vulnerable children in their communities. Teachers noted that Charlotte's example had elevated the entire school's understanding of how privilege could be used responsibly to help others. Prince Louis, now 6 years old, had maintained his friendship with Emma Morrison and dozens of other children he had met through the expanded program.
His natural ability to connect with people who were struggling had continued to develop, and his parents often found him creating art projects or writing letters for children he had never met but had heard were going through difficult times. The young prince's approach to these relationships remained refreshingly uncomplicated.
He treated each child he met as a potential friend rather than someone to be pitied, and this attitude created genuine connections that provided authentic emotional support rather than superficial charity. Louis doesn't try to cheer people up, Catherine explained to charitable organizations studying the program's success. He just treats everyone like they matter, which makes them feel valued for who they are, not just for their problems. This insight had become central to the program's training materials.
emphasizing the importance of authentic human connection over traditional charitable approaches. The focus on genuine relationship building had proven more effective than conventional methods that often created distance between helpers and those being helped.
The international media attention surrounding these developments had been overwhelmingly positive, but the royal family had been careful to ensure that the focus remained on the children being helped rather than on their own charitable work. They understood that the program's success depended on maintaining authentic relationships rather than creating publicity opportunities. Prince William had used the attention to highlight broader issues related to child welfare and family support systems. His speeches at international conferences emphasized how institutions of all kinds could better support both their employees and the communities they served, using the royal household's experience as a practical example of organizational change.
Queen Camilla had become particularly involved with the program's expansion to include elderly patients who were isolated from their families due to illness or geographic distance. Her experience with loss and grief had given her unique insights into how companionship and recognition could provide comfort during life's most difficult moments.
The ripple effects of Prince Louis's simple question had created changes that extended far beyond the royal family. Government agencies had implemented new employee support policies, healthcare systems had incorporated emotional well-being into treatment protocols, and educational institutions had developed programs that taught children about empathy and service to others.
Corporate leaders had visited the royal household to study their employee support systems, leading to widespread changes in how businesses approached workplace wellness and family support. The economic benefits of supporting employees during personal crises had become evident through reduced turnover, increased productivity, and improved workplace culture.
Mental health organizations had embraced the program's emphasis on genuine human connection as a complement to professional treatment. The success of the royal family's approach had contributed to broader acceptance of peer support programs and the recognition that authentic relationships could have measurable therapeutic benefits.
As the Christmas broadcast concluded, viewers saw Prince Louis reading a letter from a child in Australia who had been inspired by Emma Morrison's story to start her own program for supporting classmates who were going through difficult times. The letter thanked Louis for showing her that even kids can help other kids feel better when they're scared or sad. This message captured the essence of what had emerged from that initial encounter in the castle corridor.
A 5-year-old's innocent question about another person's sadness had revealed truths about compassion, service, and human dignity that had transformed institutions and inspired people around the world. The story demonstrated that authentic service to others could emerge from the simplest gestures, that institutional change was possible when organizations prioritized human needs over rigid procedures, and that children's natural empathy could teach adults profound lessons about what truly mattered in life.
James Morrison, watching the broadcast from his family's home in Yorkshire, reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that morning when he had tried to hide his tears while standing guard at Windsor Castle. His sister Emma was now healthy and thriving, his career had flourished, and his family had become part of a story that continued to inspire positive changes around the world. But perhaps most significantly, he had learned that vulnerability and strength could coexist, that asking for help was a sign of wisdom rather than weakness, and that institutions could be both professional and compassionate when they chose to prioritize human dignity above all else.
Prince Louis's question, "Why are you sad?"
Did someone hurt your feelings? Had been answered not just with words but with actions that demonstrated how genuine care for others could create positive changes that extended far beyond anyone's original imagination. The young prince had proven that even the smallest acts of compassion could have the power to transform the world, one human heart at a time. The Christmas broadcast ended with Louis waving to the camera and saying, "Remember, if you see someone who looks sad, it's okay to ask if they're all right. Sometimes just knowing that someone cares can make everything feel better."
This message, delivered with the unaffected sincerity that had made Louis beloved around the world, served as a reminder that the most powerful force for positive change was often the simplest one. One human being genuinely caring about another's well-being, regardless of the circumstances that separated them.
The story that had begun with a child's innocent observation had become a testament to the transformative power of empathy, the importance of supporting those who serve others, and the remarkable changes that were possible when institutions chose to prioritize human dignity and compassion above all else.